The scent of death lingered in the air as Gabriella Monroe clutched her father's letter, the last connection to a man who'd gambled everything and lost. The stagecoach rattled beneath her, carrying her westward to White Pine, Montana, a place she'd never seen but would now call home. It was 1878, and the frontier was unforgiving to those who arrived with nothing but grief and secrets. "Last stop before White Pine," the driver called out as they paused to water the horses. "We'll be there by nightfall, folks." Gabriella smoothed her travel-worn skirt, her fingers trembling. 4 months had passed since the attack that had left her both orphaned and changed forever. 4 months since hands meant to protect had instead destroyed her trust in human touch. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders despite the summer heat, armor against a world that had proven itself dangerous. "Miss, you all right?" asked an elderly woman seated across from her. "You're white as a sheet." "Just tired from the journey," Gabriella replied with a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "Thank you for your concern." The truth remained buried that her stepuncle's violent assault had left more than physical scars. That her father's subsequent death from a bullet in a Denver gambling hall had forced her to flee west with nothing but a deed to a property she'd never seen. That each time someone came too close, her breath caught painfully in her chest. White Pine emerged from the landscape like a mirage as the sun dipped low, a collection of wooden buildings straddling a single dusty main street, mining operations visible on the distant hillsides. Gabriella gathered her courage along with her single valise as the stagecoach rolled to a stop. "White Pine, everybody out," the driver announced. Stepping down into the dust, Gabriella felt exposed beneath the curious gazes of those gathered around the stage stop. She'd been told that her father's property lay on the outskirts of town, a small ranch that had fallen into disrepair during his long absence. "Miss Monroe," Gabriella startled at the voice, turning to find a weathered man approaching. His spectacles sat crookedly on a nose that had been broken at least once. "I'm Elmer Jenkins, the town banker. Your father sent word you'd be coming." He didn't offer his hand, for which Gabriella was silently grateful. "I'm afraid the news of his passing reached us only last month." "Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Jenkins," she said. "I understand the property is some distance from town, 3 miles west," Jenkins confirmed, "but I'm afraid there's been some complications with your inheritance." Her stomach tightened. "Complications," Jenkins sighed. "Perhaps we should discuss this at my office tomorrow. For tonight, Mrs. Finch runs a respectable boarding house. I've taken the liberty of securing you a room." Before she could press further, a commotion erupted near the saloon across the street. Shouts and the sound of breaking glass preceded 2 men bursting through the swinging doors, locked in combat. They tumbled into the street, dust billowing around them as townsfolk scattered. "Damn it, not again," Jenkins muttered. The larger man pinned the other, fist raised. "Say it again about my brother, Harper. I dare you." "That's enough," came a commanding voice. Gabriella turned to see a tall figure emerge from the shadows. The setting sun silhouetted him, but there was no mistaking the star pinned to his vest or the quiet authority in his stance. "Break it up, Mitchell," the lawman ordered, pulling the larger man off his opponent with ease. "Go home and sober up." As the crowd dispersed, the sheriff turned, and Gabriella caught her first clear look at him. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his shirt. His face was tanned from the sun, with a strong jaw shadowed by a day's growth of beard. But it was his eyes that arrested her, clear and blue as a mountain lake, and currently fixed on her. "Sheriff Morgan O'Brien," Jenkins introduced. "This is Miss Gabriella Monroe, just arrived from Denver, James Monroe's daughter." The sheriff's expression shifted minutely. "Monroe's daughter, I wasn't expecting," he caught himself. "Welcome to White Pine, Miss Monroe." He tipped his hat, and Gabriella nodded stiffly in return, unable to formulate a proper response. There was something in his gaze, not pity, but a kind of understanding that unsettled her. "I'll see Miss Monroe to Mrs. Finch's," Jenkins said, collecting her valise. "Perhaps you could join us tomorrow morning when we discuss the matter of her property." Sheriff O'Brien's gaze remained on Gabriella. "I reckon that would be appropriate." His voice was deep, with a slight roughness that suggested he didn't waste words. 8 o'clock at the bank." "Yes, thank you," Gabriella managed, avoiding direct eye contact. As Jenkins led her away, she felt the sheriff's eyes following her. She resisted the urge to glance back, focusing instead on the boardwalk beneath her feet and the task of rebuilding her life in this strange, dusty corner of the world. Mrs. Finch's boarding house proved to be a tidy 2-story building with lace curtains and polished floors. The landlady herself was a plump, efficient woman who showed Gabriella to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. "Supper's at 6, Mrs. Finch informed her. "Bathrooms at the end of the hall. You'll find hot water for washing up. Any questions, dear?" "No, thank you. This will be fine." Once alone, Gabriella sank onto the narrow bed, exhaustion washing over her. She allowed herself a moment of weakness, a single tear tracking down her cheek before she brushed it away. Weakness had no place in her new life. She had to be strong, vigilant, and above all careful. Whatever complications awaited her tomorrow, she would face them. She had survived worse. She would survive White Pine, Montana, too. Morning arrived with harsh sunlight streaming through thin curtains. Gabriella dressed in her one good outfit, a navy blue skirt and matching jacket over a white shirtwaist. After a breakfast of strong coffee and biscuits, she made her way to the bank, arriving precisely at 8. Jenkins was already there, arranging papers on his desk. He stood when she entered. "Miss Monroe," prompt as expected. "Sheriff O'Brien should be." "Ah, here he is." The sheriff entered, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. In the clear light of morning, Gabriella could see details she'd missed the previous evening: a thin scar that traced his right jawline, the creases at the corners of his eyes that suggested he was in his early 30s, perhaps 5 or 6 years her senior. "Miss Monroe," he greeted with a nod. Jenkins gestured to the chairs before his desk. "Please sit." Gabriella perched on the edge of her seat, hands folded tightly in her lap. "You mentioned complications, Mr. Jenkins." "Yes." The banker adjusted his spectacles. "Your father's property, the Double M Ranch, has been abandoned for nearly 2 years. The house and barn require substantial repairs, but that's not the primary issue." "What is?" she asked, tension building in her chest. Jenkins and O'Brien exchanged glances. The sheriff leaned forward slightly. "Your father owed money, Miss Monroe, a considerable sum, most of it to Harold Blackwell." The name meant nothing to Gabriella. "Who is this Mr. Blackwell?" "He owns the largest cattle operation in the county," Jenkins explained, "and the saloon, and most of the mines. He's been trying to acquire your father's land for years." "Why would he want a small ranch?" "Water rights," Sheriff O'Brien answered. "Your property controls access to Willow Creek. In a drought year, that water becomes mighty valuable." Gabriella's mind raced. "How much does my father owe?" $800, Jenkins replied. The sum struck her like a physical blow. It might as well have been 8,000 for all her ability to pay it. "Blackwell offered to buy the property for exactly that amount," Jenkins continued. "Enough to clear the debt, but nothing more." "That's robbery," Gabriella said, finding her voice. "My father wrote that the ranch was worth at least 3,000. "It was," Sheriff O'Brien confirmed, before neglect took its toll. Now it needs work and Blackwell knows you don't have the means to do it." Gabriella straightened her spine. "You seem quite familiar with my circumstances, Sheriff." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "Your father and I had dealings. I know he went to Denver chasing a fortune he never found. And you think I should sell to this Mr. Blackwell?" "I didn't say that," O'Brien replied, his blue eyes steady on hers. "But I do think you should know what you're up against." Jenkins cleared his throat. "There is a grace period on the debt, 30 days. After that, Blackwell can force a sale through the court." "Then I have 30 days to find a solution," Gabriella said, standing abruptly. "Is there anything else?" "Just this," Jenkins said, handing her a set of keys. "To the house and outbuildings, and you should know Blackwell isn't known for his patience." Sheriff O'Brien rose as well. "I'm headed out that way this morning. I can take you to the property if you'd like." The offer was practical, yet the thought of being alone with a man, even the sheriff, sent a tendril of anxiety through her chest. But she couldn't very well walk 3 miles. "That would be appreciated," she managed. 20 minutes later, Gabriella found herself in the sheriff's wagon, her valise at her feet, heading west out of town. The silence between them stretched uncomfortably until O'Brien finally broke it. "Your father was a good man," he said. "Not always wise with money, but good-hearted." "You knew him well." O'Brien kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "We served together briefly during the war. Later, I helped him establish the ranch. We were friends, I suppose you could say. He never mentioned you in his letters." A faint, rueful smile crossed the sheriff's face. James wasn't one for writing about the past. The trail wound through pine-covered hills, eventually descending into a valley where a small creek meandered through meadows dotted with wildflowers. In the distance, Gabriella could make out a collection of buildings nestled against the base of a wooded hill. "There it is," O'Brien said. "The Double M." As they drew closer, Gabriella's heart sank. The ranch house was a modest structure with a sagging porch. The barn beyond listed slightly to one side, its red paint faded to a dull pink. Tall grass and weeds had overtaken what once might have been a garden. O'Brien pulled the wagon to a stop in the yard. "It's not as bad as it looks," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. "The roof's sound. Foundation, too." Gabriella didn't respond, taking in the property that represented both her inheritance and her prison. This derelict ranch was all that stood between her and destitution. The sheriff climbed down from the wagon, then extended a hand to help her. Instinctively, Gabriella shrank back. O'Brien's expression changed almost imperceptibly as he lowered his hand. "I can manage," she said, gathering her skirts and descending carefully on her own. If he was offended, he didn't show it. Instead, he collected her valise and led the way to the porch. The steps creaked ominously under their weight. "Key should work in the front door," O'Brien said, "though I doubt anyone's bothered to lock it." He was right. The door swung open at her touch, revealing a dusty interior. Furniture draped in sheets stood like ghosts in the main room. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, while windows clouded with grime allowed little light. "Kitchen's through there," O'Brien said, nodding toward a doorway. "2 bedrooms in the back, pumps out front for water. Outhouse is behind the barn." Gabriella set her jaw against despair. "I see. There's a root cellar with some preserved goods if they haven't spoiled," he continued. "And I believe there's a chicken coop, though the chickens are long gone. And the ranch itself. The livestock," O'Brien's expression grew grave. "Your father sold most of the cattle before he left. There might be a few strays in the north pasture, but not enough to constitute a working ranch." "I see," she repeated, the magnitude of her situation becoming clearer by the moment. The sheriff set her valise down by the dusty table. "Look, Miss Monroe, thank you for the ride, Sheriff," she interrupted, not wanting to hear whatever well-intentioned advice he was about to offer. "I'm sure you have duties to attend to in town." He studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes too perceptive. "I do," he acknowledged. "But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that it's not safe for a woman alone out here. I assure you I can take care of myself. I don't doubt your determination, but there are practical considerations. Supplies, for one. And Blackwell's men have been known to ride through this property since your father left." "Are you suggesting they might cause trouble?" O'Brien's expression hardened. "I'm suggesting that Blackwell wants this land, and he's not accustomed to being denied what he wants." Gabriella lifted her chin. "Then he will have to become accustomed to it." A ghost of a smile touched the sheriff's lips. "You're definitely James's daughter." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. "Here, your father would want you to have this." He held out a small revolver, its pearl handle gleaming dully in the dim light. Gabriella stared at it, making no move to take it. "I don't know how to use that." "It's simple enough. 5 shots. Keep the hammer on an empty chamber when you're carrying it." He placed it on the table when she still wouldn't take it. "I'll be back tomorrow with supplies, enough to get you through a few days." "I don't need charity, Sheriff." "It's not charity, it's a loan. You can repay me when you get on your feet." He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. "Bar this behind me, and Miss Monroe, if you hear riders, stay inside." With that, he was gone, boots echoing on the porch steps. Gabriella waited until she heard the wagon departing before allowing her composure to crack. She sank onto a sheet-covered chair, a cloud of dust rising around her. What had she gotten herself into? How could she possibly make this work? The pearl-handled revolver gleamed on the table, a reminder of dangers she hadn't even considered when planning this desperate move west. With trembling fingers, she picked it up, surprised by its weight. After a moment's hesitation, she tucked it into her skirt pocket. Standing, she squared her shoulders. Self-pity wouldn't clean this house or save this ranch. She began by pulling sheets off furniture, opening windows to let in fresh air. The bedroom she claimed was small but had a real bed with a straw mattress that seemed relatively free of vermin. By late afternoon, she had made the house somewhat habitable, though her muscles ached from unfamiliar labor. The pump outside yielded rusty water at first, then clear, cold liquid that she used to scrub years of grime from the kitchen. As dusk approached, Gabriella lit the oil lamp she'd found in a cupboard. Its weak glow did little to dispel the growing shadows or her unease. Every creak of the settling house made her jump. When a floorboard groaned behind her, she whirled, the revolver somehow in her hand. "You won't need that for ghosts," came a voice from the doorway. Gabriella nearly screamed, her finger dangerously close to the trigger. A woman stood there, tall and slender, with silver-streaked black hair braided down her back. Her skin was deeply tanned, her eyes dark and knowing. "Who are you?" Gabriella demanded, the revolver still raised. "How did you get in here?" "I am Naya," the woman replied calmly. "I let myself in through the back door. You should lock it." "What do you want?" Naya gestured to the basket she carried. "To bring food." "The sheriff said James Monroe's daughter had returned. I thought you might be hungry." Slowly, Gabriella lowered the gun. "You knew my father. I live on the edge of your land. My people were here before the white settlers. Your father respected the old boundaries." She set the basket on the table. "There is rabbit stew and cornbread." The mention of food made Gabriella's stomach growl audibly. She hadn't eaten since breakfast. "Thank you," she said, embarrassed by her initial reaction. "I'm Gabriella," Naya nodded. "You look like him around the eyes." She glanced around the house. "This place needs more than one woman's hands to make it right again." "I'll manage," Gabriella said, though her aching back argued otherwise. "Perhaps. But why manage alone when there are those who would help?" Naya moved toward the door. "Come to my cabin tomorrow. I will show you which plants can be eaten and which heal sickness. You will need this knowledge." Before Gabriella could respond, the woman was gone, melting into the gathering darkness like a shadow. The basket remained, its contents still warm. That night, after barring both doors and checking the windows twice, Gabriella lay in her father's bed, the revolver on the small table beside her. Sleep came fitfully, punctuated by dreams of Denver and the hands that had taken her trust. She woke at dawn, muscles stiff from the previous day's work. After washing her face in cold water from the pump, she forced herself to continue cleaning. The kitchen revealed a cast iron stove that seemed functional, though she had no coal or wood to test it. Mid-morning, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Heart racing, she retrieved the revolver from her pocket, positioning herself near a window where she could see the yard. Relief washed through her as Sheriff O'Brien's wagon came into view. He wasn't alone. A young man rode alongside on a dappled mare. Gabriella met them on the porch, the revolver hidden in the folds of her skirt. "Miss Monroe," O'Brien greeted, removing his hat. "This is Timothy Walsh. He works at the livery in town." The young man, barely out of his teens, nodded nervously. "Madam." "Timothy's brought supplies," the sheriff continued, "and he's handy with repairs. I thought he might help with the barn roof and the porch while I unload." Gabriella wanted to refuse to send them both away, but practicality won out over pride. "That's very kind. Thank you." For the next several hours, the ranch came alive with activity. Timothy set to work reinforcing the sagging porch while Sheriff O'Brien unloaded supplies, sacks of flour and beans, coffee, salt pork, ammunition for the revolver, tools, nails, lamp oil, and even a small sack of seed potatoes. "I brought coal for the stove," he said, carrying a heavy sack toward the house. "And Timothy will deliver firewood later this week." "This is far more than I can repay soon," Gabriella said, following him inside. O'Brien set the coal by the stove. "Like I said, it's a loan." "Why are you doing this, Sheriff? You barely know me." He straightened, wiping his hands on his pants. "I knew your father, and I don't much care for Blackwell or his methods." "Is that all?" His blue eyes met hers directly. "For now, yes." He gestured toward the kitchen. "Do you know how to work that stove?" "I can learn," she said, though domestic skills had never been her strong suit. A faint smile touched his lips. "I'm sure you can, but for today I've brought lunch." He returned to the wagon and came back with a cloth-wrapped bundle. "From the hotel restaurant. Nothing fancy, but it's hot." They ate on the porch, watching Timothy work. The boy was indeed skilled, the porch already noticeably sturdier. Sheriff O'Brien kept a respectful distance from Gabriella, seemingly aware of her discomfort with proximity. "I met your neighbor last night," she said between bites of surprisingly good stew. "Naya," O'Brien nodded. "She's a good woman, knows more about surviving out here than most. Her people, the Salish, have been in this valley for generations. She mentioned showing me which plants can be eaten. I'd take her up on that. Naya doesn't offer help lightly." He paused, considering his next words. "Miss Monroe, have you given thought to what you'll do about Blackwell's claim?" Gabriella set down her spoon. "I can't pay the debt, not in 30 days. But I won't sell for less than the land is worth. Then you'll need to make the ranch productive again, fast." "How? You said yourself there's hardly any livestock left." O'Brien leaned back against the porch railing. "There's more to ranching than cattle. This land has good soil. You could plant crops, and there are wild horses in the hills that could be caught and trained." "I know nothing about farming or horse breaking." "No, but you can learn, and there are folks who would help for a share in the profits." Gabriella regarded him skeptically. Out of the goodness of their hearts. Out of dislike for Blackwell, O'Brien corrected. He's not made many friends in White Pine. Before she could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. 3 riders appeared on the trail, moving at a leisurely pace toward the ranch house. O'Brien stood, his posture changing subtly. "Get inside, Miss Monroe." "Who is it?" "Blackwell's men." He adjusted the pistol at his hip. "Go on now." Gabriella hesitated, then retreated to the doorway, unwilling to hide completely. Timothy had stopped working, hammer clutched in his hand like a weapon. The riders pulled up in the yard, dust billowing around them. The leader was a hard-faced man with a drooping mustache, his eyes cold as he surveyed the scene. "Well, well, Sheriff O'Brien playing delivery boy," he drawled. "Ain't that sweet?" "State your business, Holt," O'Brien replied evenly, "just being neighborly." Heard James Monroe's girl had come to claim her inheritance. Holt's gaze shifted to Gabriella. "Mr. Blackwell sends his regards, madam. Says he'd be happy to discuss the sale of this property at your convenience." "I have no intention of selling," Gabriella replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Holt's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's so. Shame, considering the state of things. Mr. Blackwell's offer is more than generous." "The lady's not interested," O'Brien said, "and you're trespassing." One of the other men spat tobacco juice onto the dusty ground. "Public trail runs right through this property, Sheriff." "Not anymore it doesn't," O'Brien countered. "Miss Monroe has every right to close it, so unless you've got legitimate business here, I suggest you move along." Tension crackled in the air. Holt's hand hovered near his gun, and for a terrible moment, Gabriella thought violence would erupt in her front yard. Then Holt laughed, the sound as dry as dead leaves. "No need to get proddy, Sheriff. We're just passing through." He touched the brim of his hat mockingly toward Gabriella. "Madam, I expect we'll be seeing more of each other." The 3 men wheeled their horses and rode away, but not before one of them fired a shot into the air, causing Timothy to drop his hammer. Sheriff O'Brien's jaw was tight as he watched them go. "And that," he said quietly, "is why I brought the gun." The encounter left Gabriella shaken, though she tried not to show it. After O'Brien and Timothy departed, promising to return in 2 days, she found herself jumping at every sound, the revolver never far from reach. The next day dawned clear and hot. Determined to make progress, Gabriella ventured to Naya's cabin, a small but well-maintained structure nestled in a grove of aspen trees near the creek. The older woman seemed unsurprised by her arrival. "Come," she said simply. "There is much to learn." For hours, Naya led her through meadows and woods, pointing out plants that could be eaten or used as medicine. She showed Gabriella how to identify fresh animal tracks, how to set snares for rabbits, how to find clean water if the creek ran dry. "Your father learned these things," Naya said as they rested beside the creek. "He respected the land." "Why did he leave then?" Gabriella asked. "If he built this place, loved it even?" Naya's dark eyes grew distant. "Some men are never satisfied with what they have. They always look for more, believing happiness lies just over the next hill." She turned to Gabriella. "But you are not like this." "How would you know?" "I see it in your eyes. You seek safety, not fortune." The observation struck uncomfortably close to truth. Gabriella looked away. "I need to make the ranch work, to pay off my father's debt." "There is more than one kind of debt," Naya replied cryptically. She rose in a single fluid motion. "Come, I will show you where wild onions grow." By the time Gabriella returned to the ranch house, her basket was full of edible plants, and her mind crowded with new knowledge. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she almost didn't notice the figure sitting on her porch, until she was halfway across the yard. Sheriff O'Brien stood as she approached. "Miss Monroe, I hope I'm not intruding." "Sheriff, I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow. I was patrolling this way, thought I'd check if you needed anything." He nodded toward her basket. "Been foraging with Naya, I see." "Yes, she's very knowledgeable." "That she is." He hesitated. "I've been thinking about your situation. There might be a solution you haven't considered." Gabriella climbed the steps, maintaining a careful distance. "I'm open to suggestions." "There's a herd of mustangs that comes down from the hills to water at Willow Creek, just north of your property. Wild, but good stock. If you could capture some, break them to saddle, you could sell them in town. Horses are bringing good prices these days." "And how would I capture wild horses, Sheriff? I'm hardly a seasoned wrangler." "No, but I was before I pinned on this badge." He tapped the star on his chest. "I could help. For a share of the profits, like I mentioned." Gabriella studied him, searching for ulterior motives. "Why would you do that? Surely the sheriff has more important duties. I have deputies, and I believe in giving people a fair chance." "Is that all?" His blue eyes held her steadily. "For now, yes." The echo of his previous answer wasn't lost on her. "When would you propose to begin this venture?" "Tomorrow. I've already spoken to Timothy. He'll help us build a corral by the creek." Gabriella's mind raced through the implications. Working closely with O'Brien meant more interaction, more opportunity for her carefully constructed walls to be tested. Yet the alternative was losing everything. "Very well," she said finally. "Tomorrow." True to his word, Sheriff O'Brien arrived at dawn the next day, his wagon loaded with timber. Timothy followed on horseback, leading a second mount, a steady-looking bay mare. "For you," O'Brien explained, nodding toward the horse. "Can't round up mustangs on foot." Gabriella eyed the mare warily. "It's been some time since I rode. Daisy's gentle as they come. We'll start slow." The day passed in a blur of activity. While Timothy constructed a sturdy corral near the creek, O'Brien helped Gabriella reacquaint herself with riding. To her surprise, the physical memory returned quickly, though she remained tense in the saddle. "Relax your shoulders," O'Brien advised, walking alongside. "You're doing fine." By mid-afternoon, the corral was nearly complete, and Gabriella could guide Daisy with growing confidence. O'Brien led her along the creek, explaining his plan for capturing the mustangs. "They come to water at dusk and dawn. We'll set up near that bend in the creek, drive them toward the corral. With 3 of us, we should be able to herd at least a few in." "And then what?" Gabriella asked. "How do we tame them?" O'Brien's expression grew serious. "That's the harder part. Takes patience and a gentle hand." He glanced at her. "Are you up for it?" "I have no choice." "There's always a choice, Miss Monroe." She met his gaze directly. "Not for me. Not anymore." Something flickered in his blue eyes, a question perhaps, or understanding. Before he could respond, Timothy called from the corral, waving them over. "All done, Sheriff, sturdy as they come." "Good work," O'Brien called back. To Gabriella he added, "We'll start early tomorrow, be ready before dawn." That night, Gabriella slept fitfully, her dreams haunted by galloping hooves and reaching hands. She woke in darkness, heart pounding, the revolver clutched in her fingers. Slowly she forced herself to breathe, to remember where she was, safe. For now. She dressed by lamplight, choosing her most practical skirt and sturdiest boots. Her hair she braided tightly, pinning it at the nape of her neck. By the time she heard horses in the yard, gray light was just beginning to seep into the sky. Sheriff O'Brien and Timothy waited outside, 3 additional horses with them. O'Brien handed her a coiled rope. "Ever used one of these?" "No." "I'll show you the basics, but stay back when we make the drive. Watch and learn first." For the next hour, he demonstrated simple roping techniques. his hands sure and steady on the rope. Gabriella tried to focus on the lesson rather than the man, but found herself noting the way sunlight caught in his dark hair, the precise movements of his strong hands, the timbre of his voice when he offered encouragement. "You're a quick study," he said as she successfully looped the rope around a fence post. Ready to try from horseback. By the time the sun cleared the eastern hills, Gabriella could manage basic throws from Daisy's saddle. O'Brien declared her prepared enough for their first attempt at the mustangs. "Remember," he said as they rode toward the creek, "stay back. These are wild animals. They'll run first, fight if cornered." They positioned themselves in a grove of trees near the bend in the creek. The wait wasn't long. Within half an hour, the sound of hooves announced the mustangs' arrival. A dozen horses appeared, led by a magnificent black stallion. "That's Thunder," O'Brien whispered. "Been trying to catch him for years." The mustangs approached the water cautiously, the stallion alert for danger. When they lowered their heads to drink, O'Brien gave a silent signal to Timothy. The young man circled wide, emerging from the trees behind the herd. What followed was a blur of dust and motion. Timothy whooped and drove the mustangs forward while O'Brien cut off their escape route, directing them toward the hidden corral. Gabriella held her position, heart racing as the wild horses thundered past. "Now," O'Brien shouted to her, "drive them in." Gabriella urged Daisy forward, adrenaline overriding fear as she helped funnel the panicked mustangs into the waiting corral. Most of the herd, including Thunder, veered away at the last moment, but 4 horses, 2 mares, and 2 yearlings galloped into the trap. Timothy swung the gate closed behind them. "We did it," he crowed, face flushed with excitement. O'Brien's smile was more measured as he dismounted. "4's a good start. They'll bring $300, maybe more if we train them well." Gabriella stared at the captured horses, their sides heaving, eyes wild with fear. "They're terrified." "They'll settle," O'Brien assured her. "First step is just letting them get used to humans being nearby. No sudden movements, no loud noises." For the next several days, that became the rhythm of life at the Double M. Mornings were spent with the mustangs sitting near the corral, speaking in low voices, gradually moving closer until the horses no longer panicked at human presence. Afternoons were devoted to ranch repairs, and Gabriella's continued riding lessons. Sheriff O'Brien came daily, sometimes bringing Timothy, sometimes alone. Despite her initial wariness, Gabriella found herself looking forward to his arrival. He was unfailingly respectful of her boundaries, never standing too close, never making unexpected movements in her direction. A week after capturing the mustangs, O'Brien arrived with news. "Blackwell's been asking questions in town. About you, about me, about what we're doing out here." Gabriella looked up from the fence she was mending. "Should I be concerned? Just be cautious. He doesn't like losing, and he considers this land already his." O'Brien leaned against a post. "We should try for more mustangs tomorrow. The 4 we have are coming along, but we'll need more to make a real difference." "I'll be ready." He nodded, then hesitated. "There's a social at the church on Saturday. Might be good for you to meet some of the townsfolk. Make allies." The thought of being surrounded by strangers sent a wave of anxiety through her. "I don't think, just consider it," he said. "Sometimes the best defense is a strong community." After he left, Gabriella found herself contemplating his suggestion. The isolation of the ranch had been both blessing and curse, safety from unwanted contact, but vulnerability to threats like Blackwell. Perhaps O'Brien was right about building connections in town. Saturday arrived clear and warm. Gabriella bathed in water heated on the now functional stove, washing away days of dust and horse smell. Her wardrobe options were limited, but she managed to press her best dress, a simple blue cotton with white trim. Sheriff O'Brien arrived promptly at 4, his wagon freshly painted, his usual work clothes replaced by a clean shirt and vest. He'd even trimmed his beard. The transformation was subtle but striking. "Miss Monroe," he greeted, hat in hand. "You look lovely." "Thank you," she replied, self-conscious under his gaze. "You clean up well yourself, Sheriff." The drive to town passed pleasantly, O'Brien pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the area's early days. Gabriella found herself relaxing incrementally in his company, his steady presence becoming a comfort rather than a threat. White Pine's small church was already crowded when they arrived, tables set up outside laden with food. Women bustled about arranging dishes while men clustered in groups, discussing cattle prices and mining prospects. Conversation lulled momentarily as O'Brien helped Gabriella down from the wagon. She felt the weight of curious stares, heard the murmur of speculation rippling through the gathering. "Sheriff's brought the Monroe girl. Heard she's trying to save that run-down ranch. Blackwell won't like that." O'Brien's hand settled lightly at her elbow, not grasping, just guiding. "Come meet Reverend Phillips," he said, steering her toward a balding man with kind eyes. For the next hour, Gabriella was introduced to what seemed like the entire population of White Pine. Names and faces blurred together, though she tried to remember those who seemed particularly friendly. Mrs. Collins, who ran the general store, Dr. Harrison and his wife, the Weaver sisters who operated a successful dressmaking business. "See, not so terrible," O'Brien murmured as they moved toward the food tables. "They all seem to know about my situation," Gabriella observed. "Small towns have long memories and longer tongues. But most of these people are decent folk. They'll stand with you if Blackwell pushes too hard." As if summoned by his name, a hush fell over the gathering. Gabriella turned to see a man striding toward them, tall and imposing, expensively dressed, with silver hair and a trimmed beard. His eyes, cold as January ice, fixed on her with calculating interest. "Miss Monroe, I presume," he said, his voice cultured but hard-edged. "Harold Blackwell. I've been looking forward to making your acquaintance." O'Brien's stance shifted subtly, placing himself partially between them. "Blackwell, Sheriff." Blackwell's smile didn't touch his eyes. "I see you've appointed yourself Miss Monroe's protector. How gallant." "Business partners," O'Brien corrected. "Is that what they are calling it these days?" Blackwell turned his attention back to Gabriella. "My dear, I understand you've declined my generous offer for your father's property. I hope you'll reconsider." "The offer wasn't generous, Mr. Blackwell," Gabriella replied, finding her voice. "It was opportunistic." Several onlookers gasped at her directness. Blackwell's smile tightened. "I see the sheriff has been filling your head with nonsense. The fact remains that your father owed me money I'm willing to forgive in exchange for that worthless plot of land. If it's worthless, why do you want it so badly? Sentiment, perhaps. Or maybe I just dislike unfinished business." His gaze hardened. "Either way, you have 18 days remaining before I exercise my legal rights. I suggest you use them wisely." With a slight bow, he turned and walked away, leaving a wake of whispers behind him. O'Brien's jaw was tight. "Don't let him intimidate you." "I won't," Gabriella said, though her hands trembled slightly. "But he's right about one thing: time is running out." The encounter cast a shadow over the remainder of the social, though many townspeople made a point of approaching Gabriella afterward, offering encouragement and, in some cases, practical help. "My boys can help with that barn roof," Mr. Collins offered. "I've got seed potatoes you can plant," added his wife. "Those Mustangs need shoes," the blacksmith noted. I could come out next week. By the time they departed, Gabriella felt cautiously hopeful. Perhaps O'Brien was right about the power of community. The drive back to the ranch was quiet, both of them lost in thought. As they crested the final hill, the Double M came into view, bathed in moonlight. Despite its dilapidated state, Gabriella felt a surge of possessiveness. This was hers. She wouldn't let Blackwell take it without a fight. "Thank you for suggesting the social," she said as O'Brien pulled the wagon to a stop. "You were right about making allies. Blackwell has money and influence, but he's not well liked," O'Brien replied. "That counts for something in a place like White Pine." He helped her down from the wagon, his hands releasing hers the moment her feet touched ground. Always careful, always respectful of her boundaries. The realization stirred something in her chest. "Would you like to come in?" she found herself asking. "For coffee?" Surprise flickered across his face, followed by a warmth that reached his eyes. "I'd like that." Inside, Gabriella busied herself with the stove, grateful for the familiar task to occupy her hands. O'Brien settled at the kitchen table, hat resting on his knee. "You've made improvements," he observed, looking around the now clean kitchen. "Place is starting to look like a home." "It's coming along," she agreed, measuring coffee into the pot. "Though there's still much to do. Always is with a ranch, never really finished." A comfortable silence fell between them as the coffee brewed. When Gabriella set a steaming cup before him, their fingers brushed momentarily. She didn't flinch away as she might have days earlier. "May I ask you something, Miss Monroe?" O'Brien said after taking a sip. "Gabriella," she corrected impulsively. "If we're business partners, you might as well use my given name." A smile touched his lips. "Gabriella, then, and I'm Morgan." "What did you want to ask?" "Morgan." His expression grew serious. "What brought you to White Pine?" "Your father had been gone for years. Why claim this place now?" The question pierced the comfortable moment. Gabriella turned away, focusing on the darkness beyond the window. "I had nowhere else to go. No family back east, none who would have me." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, drawing strength from its warmth. "My mother died when I was a child. My father remarried, but my stepmother passed 2 years ago. After that, he left me with her brother in Denver while he sought his fortune. And when your father died, my stepuncle made it clear I was no longer welcome." The words came out more bitter than intended. This deed was all I had left. Morgan was silent for a moment, studying her face. "There's more you're not saying." Gabriella met his gaze steadily. "There's more I choose not to say, to anyone." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough, we all have parts of our past we'd rather leave buried. Including you, Sheriff," a shadow crossed his face. "Especially me." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken histories. Finally, Morgan stood, setting his empty cup on the table. "I should go. Dawn comes early and we've got mustangs to catch." At the door, he paused, turning back to her. "Thank you for the coffee, Gabriella." "Thank you for everything else," she replied softly. After he left, Gabriella stood in the doorway, watching his wagon disappear down the moonlit trail. For the first time since arriving in White Pine, she felt something besides fear or determination, a dangerous, tender feeling she dared not name. The next morning dawned cloudy and cool, a welcome change from the summer heat. Morgan arrived earlier than usual, bringing news that the wild mustangs had been spotted near the North Ridge. "If we hurry, we might catch them before they move on," he said, helping Gabriella saddle Daisy. "Timothy's meeting us at the creek." They rode out, the damp air heavy with the scent of pine and sage. Gabriella found herself watching Morgan's profile as he rode beside her, the strong line of his jaw, the careful way he scanned the horizon, the ease with which he sat his horse. "What made you become a sheriff?" she asked. He considered the question. After the war, I drifted, tried ranching, mining, even drove cattle up from Texas once. None of it felt right. He adjusted his hat against the strengthening breeze. Then White Pine's previous sheriff was killed in a robbery. Town council asked me to step in temporarily. 7 years later, I'm still here. Do you ever regret it? Some days. His gaze met hers briefly. But a man needs purpose. This badge gives me that. They found Timothy waiting at the designated spot, excitement evident in his young face. They're just over the ridge, Sheriff. At least 20 of them, including Thunder. Morgan's expression grew focused. Good. We'll approach from 3 sides, same as before. Gabriella, remember to stay back until I signal. The plan worked better than they could have hoped. Startled by their approach, the Mustangs bolted directly toward the hidden corral. In the ensuing chaos, 8 horses, including, miraculously, the black stallion Thunder, were trapped inside. We got him, Timothy whooped, nearly falling from his saddle in excitement. We actually got Thunder. Morgan's expression was a mix of disbelief and triumph. Never thought I'd see the day. He turned to Gabriella, eyes alight with rare, boyish enthusiasm. Do you know what he's worth? A stallion like that could bring $1,000 from the right buyer. Relief swept through Gabriella with Thunder and the other captures. They might actually meet Blackwell's demand before the deadline. We did it, she breathed, allowing herself a moment of genuine hope. That hope was short-lived. As they secured the corral, the sound of approaching riders drew their attention. 3 men on horseback emerged from the tree's holt, and 2 others Gabriella recognized from their previous encounter. Morgan's hand moved to his pistol. Holt, you're trespassing again. Holt's thin smile held no warmth. Just passing through, Sheriff, but what do we have here? Looks like you've been busy. His gaze shifted to the corral, lingering on Thunder. That's quite a stallion. And not yours to concern yourself with, Morgan replied evenly. Mr. Blackwell might disagree. See, he considers these wild horses part of his range. These horses are free roaming, and we captured them legally on Monroe property. Holt's expression hardened. For now, it's Monroe property, but not for long. He leaned forward in his saddle. Mr. Blackwell doesn't like being crossed, Sheriff, especially not by a lawman who should know better than to take sides. I uphold the law, Holt. That's not taking sides. Call it what you want. Holt's gaze shifted to Gabriella, something ugly in his eyes. Just remember, accidents happen out here all the time. Terrible accidents. Timothy moved closer to Gabriella, his young face contorted with anger. You threatening a lady, Holt. That's low, even for Blackwell's dog. Watch your mouth, boy, one of Holt's companions growled. Morgan stepped between them, his voice deadly quiet. That's enough. Holt, you and your men ride out now while you still can, and you tell Blackwell that if anything happens to Miss Monroe or this property, he'll answer to me personally. For a tense moment, it seemed Holt might challenge him. Then the man spat and jerked his horse around. Your funeral, Sheriff. With that, the 3 riders galloped away, dust billowing in their wake. Morgan watched until they disappeared, his expression grim. Timothy, ride into town. Tell Deputy Watkins what happened. I want extra patrols out this way. Yes, sir. Timothy mounted quickly. What about you? I'll stay here tonight, make sure there's no trouble. He glanced at Gabriella. If that's acceptable. The thought of Morgan standing guard against Blackwell's men should have reassured her. Instead, it sent a different kind of unease through her veins, not fear of him, but of her own softening resolve. Of course, she managed. There's the spare bedroom. After Timothy departed, they turned their attention to the captured Mustangs. Thunder paced the corral, magnificent and furious, while the other horses huddled nervously at the far end. He's not going to be easy to gentle, Morgan observed. Might be best to sell him as is, to someone with experience handling stallions. You know anyone who'd buy him? There's a horse broker in Helena who'd pay top dollar. I could send a telegram tomorrow. They worked until dusk, ensuring the corral was secure and bringing water for the mustangs. As darkness fell, they returned to the house, both dusty and exhausted from the day's events. "I'll check the perimeter before turning in," Morgan said after a simple supper of beans and cornbread. "Lock the door behind me." Left alone, Gabriella moved through the house, extinguishing lamps until only the kitchen remained lit. Through the window, she could see Morgan's silhouette as he walked the property's edge, vigilant against unseen threats. When he returned, she had coffee waiting. All quiet, for now. He accepted the cup gratefully. But Holt's not one to make empty threats. "Blackwell wants that stallion and this land." 11 days, Gabriella murmured. "That's all we have until his deadline." "We'll make it," Morgan assured her. "Between Thunder and the other horses, plus what we've already trained, we should clear enough to pay the debt. And if we don't?" His blue eyes held hers steadily. "Then we'll find another way. I won't let him take this from you, Gabriella." The conviction in his voice stirred something deep within her, a dangerous hope that extended beyond the ranch's survival. She looked away, afraid he might read too much in her expression. "You should rest," she said. "The spare room is ready." Morgan nodded, setting down his empty cup. "Good night, then." "Good night, Morgan." After he disappeared down the hallway, Gabriella remained at the table, her thoughts tumultuous. The walls she'd built around herself since Denver were crumbling, stone by stone, and she wasn't entirely certain she wanted to rebuild them. Sleep eluded her that night, her mind racing with thoughts of Blackwell's threats and Morgan's promise. When dawn finally broke, she rose wearily, the sound of movement in the kitchen drawing her from her room. Morgan stood at the stove, coffee already brewing. He'd clearly been awake for some time, his hair damp from washing. "Morning," he greeted. "Hope I didn't wake you." "No, I was already up." She moved to the cupboard for cups, acutely aware of his presence in the small kitchen. "Any trouble overnight?" "All quiet. But I'd feel better if you came into town today while I arrange for the horse broker." Gabriella hesitated. "The mustangs need tending. Timothy can handle that." "I don't like leaving you out here alone, not after Holt's threats." His concern warmed and annoyed her simultaneously. "I'm not helpless, Morgan. Never said you were. But even I don't face 3 armed men alone if I can help it." His expression softened. "Please, Gabriella, just for today." Put that way, she could hardly refuse. "Very well. I could use supplies anyway." They arrived in White Pine by mid-morning, drawing curious glances as they rode side by side down Main Street. Morgan accompanied her to the general store, where Mrs. Collins greeted them warmly. "Miss Monroe." "How lovely to see you in town," the shopkeeper exclaimed. "I've been setting aside things I thought might be useful for your place." While Gabriella selected supplies, Morgan excused himself to the telegraph office. "I won't be long," he promised. "Stay inside until I return, Mrs." Collins watched him go with a knowing smile. "The sheriff's taken quite an interest in your welfare." Gabriella busied herself examining a bolt of fabric. "We have a business arrangement, the mustangs." "Is that what they're calling it?" Mrs. Collins chuckled. "Well, business or not, it's good to see Morgan O'Brien looking after someone besides the whole town for a change. That man carries too much weight on his shoulders. You've known him a long time, since he first drifted into White Pine, back in '71. Haunted eyes and hardly a word to spare for anyone." Mrs. Collins measured coffee into a paper sack. "He's changed since then, found purpose, but there's still a loneliness to him." Gabriella absorbed this information silently, adding it to the pieces of Morgan she'd already collected. Before she could ask more, the shop door opened, admitting not Morgan but Harold Blackwell. "Mrs. Collins," he greeted smoothly. And Miss Monroe, what a pleasant surprise. Gabriella straightened her spine. Mr. Blackwell, shopping for your ranch, I see. He managed to make the word sound like a joke. How industrious. Was there something you needed, Mr. Blackwell? Mrs. Collins asked pointedly, just browsing. His cold eyes never left Gabriella's face. Though I am curious, Miss Monroe, have you reconsidered my offer? I have not. Pity. I understand you've captured some wild horses. Quite the accomplishment for a novice rancher. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course, wild horses require proper handling, dangerous animals. Accidents happen. The threat in his words was unmistakable. Before Gabriella could respond, the door opened again and Morgan stepped in. His expression darkened at the sight of Blackwell. Everything all right here. Perfectly civil, Blackwell replied. Miss Monroe and I were just discussing the hazards of horse breaking. He tipped his hat. Good day, ladies. Sheriff. After he departed, Mrs. Collins let out a breath. That man gives me the shivers. Morgan moved to Gabriella's side, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his protective presence. Did he threaten you? Not directly. She met his concerned gaze. But his meaning was clear enough. Morgan's jaw tightened. The broker will be here tomorrow to look at Thunder. Once we have that money, Blackwell loses his leverage. Unless something happens to Thunder before then. I've arranged for Deputy Watkins to watch the ranch tonight. And Timothy's staying with the horses. His hand hovered near hers, not quite touching. We'll get through this, Gabriella. His certainty should have reassured her. Instead, it underscored the growing connection between them, a connection that terrified and tempted her in equal measure. The rest of the day passed without incident. Morgan insisted on accompanying Gabriella to every stop, the bank, where Jenkins reported no messages from Blackwell, the livery, where arrangements were made for transporting the Mustangs, and finally, to a late lunch at the hotel restaurant. You don't have to shadow me everywhere, Gabriella protested as they were seated. Humor me, Morgan replied, his expression serious. Blackwell doesn't make idle threats. Their meal was interrupted by Timothy, bursting into the restaurant with a wild look in his eyes. Sheriff. You gotta come quick. The corral, someone cut the fence. Gabriella's heart plummeted. The horses. Most stayed put, but Thunder's gone, and 2 of the mares. Morgan was already on his feet. When? Don't know for sure. I was training the yearlings at the other corral. Didn't notice till I went to water them just now. Outside, Morgan swung into his saddle. Gabriella, stay in town. Timothy, find Watkins and tell him what happened. I'm coming with you, Gabriella insisted, already mounting Daisy. It's not safe, it's my ranch, my horses. Her eyes flashed with determination. I'm coming. Morgan held her gaze for a moment, then nodded curtly. Stay close. They rode hard, reaching the Double M in half the usual time. The damage was evident immediately. A section of the corral fence had been cut clean through, tracks leading away toward Blackwell's property. Morgan dismounted to examine the ground. 3 riders, one of them Holt, judging by those boot prints. He looked up, eyes hard. They drove the horses onto Blackwell land. Can we get them back? Not without proof they're yours. Morgan's expression was grim. And even with proof, crossing onto Blackwell's property would be asking for trouble. So we just let him steal them. Gabriella demanded, anger overriding caution. No, Morgan remounted. We're going to town. I'll swear out a warrant based on Timothy's testimony, then we'll do this legally. That could take days. The broker will be here tomorrow, I know. His voice softened. I'm sorry, Gabriella. But rushing onto Blackwell's land half-cocked will only make things worse. Reluctantly, she followed him back to White Pine, frustration and helplessness burning in her chest. At the sheriff's office, they found Deputy Watkins and a grim-faced Timothy. Found more tracks by the north fence, Watkins reported. Looks like they've been watching the place, waiting for an opportunity. Morgan nodded, unsurprised. Timothy, write down exactly what you saw. Watkins, take his statement, then ride out to the Johnson place. Old man Johnson has a view of Blackwell's south pasture. See if he noticed any new horses being brought in today. What can I do? Gabriella asked. Stay here where it's safe. Morgan's expression brooked no argument. Please, Gabriella, let me handle this. Relegated to a chair in the corner of the sheriff's office, Gabriella seethed with helpless anger. Hours passed as Morgan dispatched telegrams, interviewed potential witnesses, and organized a search party for the following morning. You should get some rest at the boarding house, he told her as evening approached. There's nothing more to be done tonight. I want to go back to the ranch. Morgan shook his head. Not tonight, it's not safe. That's my home, she insisted, standing. I won't be driven away by Blackwell's threats. It's not just threats anymore. They've escalated to theft and trespassing. Next could be worse. Morgan stepped closer, his voice low. I can't protect you if you're out there alone. I never asked for your protection. No, you didn't. His blue eyes held hers, something unspoken flickering in their depths. But you have it all the same. The intensity of his gaze sent warmth coursing through her veins. She looked away first, unsettled by her own reaction. One night, then I return home with or without your approval. Morgan sighed. Fair enough. I'll escort you to Mrs. Finch's. The boarding house was quiet when they arrived, most residents already retired for the evening. Mrs. Finch herself showed Gabriella to a small but comfortable room, clucking sympathetically about that awful Blackwell and promising hot water for washing. Left alone, Gabriella sat heavily on the bed, the day's events crashing over her like a wave. The Mustangs, their best hope for paying Blackwell's debt, were gone. In 7 days she could lose everything: the ranch, her independence, her future. A knock at the door startled her from dark thoughts. She opened it to find Morgan standing there, hat in hand. May I come in? Just for a moment. Propriety dictated she refuse, but Gabriella found herself stepping aside. Morgan entered, careful to leave the door partially open for the sake of appearances. I wanted to tell you we found Thunder. Hope surged through her. Where? Johnson spotted him in Blackwell's south pasture, just as we suspected. Morgan's expression remained grave. But there's a complication. Blackwell's claiming the stallion broke into his property and was mingling with his mares. He's demanding a stud fee for each mare before he'll release the horse. That's absurd. He stole Thunder. We know that. But proving it is another matter. Johnson didn't see who brought the horse in, just that he appeared sometime this afternoon. Morgan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I've sent for the circuit judge, but he won't arrive for 3 days. The broker will be here tomorrow, Gabriella reminded him. Without Thunder, we lose our chance to pay the debt. I know. Morgan paced the small room. There might be another way, not strictly by the book, but... He trailed off, considering. Tell me. He met her gaze directly. We could recover Thunder ourselves, tonight. You mean steal him back, Gabriella clarified. I mean reclaim stolen property. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Technically within my authority as sheriff, though Blackwell would certainly dispute that interpretation. It's dangerous. Very. If we're caught on Blackwell's land, even with my badge, there could be violence. His expression grew serious. That's why I need to do this alone. No. The word escaped before she could consider it. We're partners in this. I'm coming with you. Morgan studied her face. Gabriella, if anything happened to you, it's my choice, she interrupted. My risk to take. A long moment passed between them, something unspoken charging the air. Finally, Morgan nodded. Be ready at midnight. Wear dark clothing and bring that revolver I gave you. After he left, Gabriella sat motionless on the bed, her heart racing. What was she doing, agreeing to such a dangerous plan? And why did the thought of Morgan facing danger alone affect her so deeply? Questions without answers circled her mind as she prepared for the night ahead. Midnight found them riding silently along the creek that marked the boundary between Monroe and Blackwell land. The moon was mercifully obscured by clouds, providing cover as they approached the south pasture where Thunder had been spotted. Johnson said they're keeping him separate from the main herd, Morgan whispered as they dismounted. There's a small corral near the line shack. They tethered their horses in a stand of cottonwoods and continued on foot. Gabriella's heart pounded so loudly she was certain it would give them away. The revolver weighed heavily in her pocket, a reminder of potential consequences. The line shack appeared through the darkness, a small wooden structure where cowboys could shelter while working the distant corners of the ranch. Beyond it stood a crude corral, and within it paced a dark shape Gabriella immediately recognized as Thunder. "There he is," she breathed. Morgan touched her arm lightly. "Stay here. Watch for movement from the shack. There may be a guard." Before she could protest, he slipped away, moving with surprising stealth for such a large man. Gabriella pressed herself against a tree, straining to see any sign of danger. The minutes stretched interminably as Morgan made his way to the corral. A muffled curse broke the silence, followed by the sound of wood splintering. Thunder whinnied in alarm. Gabriella's hand moved to the revolver, fear closing her throat as a light appeared in the shack's window. "Who's out there?" came a gruff voice. The door opened, spilling lamplight across the yard. A man emerged, rifle in hand. "Show yourself." Morgan had frozen beside the corral, partially concealed by shadows but visible to anyone looking carefully. The guard raised his rifle, scanning the area. When he turned toward the corral, Gabriella acted without thinking. She stepped into the open, deliberately snapping a twig underfoot. The guard whirled toward the sound. "Who's there?" he demanded, rifle now pointed in her direction. Gabriella's mind raced. I'm lost," she called, pitching her voice higher than normal. "My horse threw me. Can you help?" The guard lowered his rifle slightly. "A woman out here at night." Suspicion colored his tone. "Show yourself clearly." Gabriella moved forward, hands visible. "Please, I'm just trying to find the road back to White Pine." As she'd hoped, the guard's attention fixed on her, his back now to Morgan and the corral. She saw Morgan slip into action, working quickly at the gate. "This is private property, miss," the guard said, approaching her. "Blackwell land." "I'm sorry, I didn't realize." Gabriella forced a tremulous note into her voice. "I was visiting the Monroe ranch and got turned around in the dark." The guard stiffened. "Monroe, you know that woman?" "We're acquainted," Gabriella hedged, keenly aware of Morgan leading Thunder silently from the corral. "Could you point me toward the main road?" Before the guard could respond, Thunder's distinctive whinny split the night. The guard spun, rifle rising. "Hey, what the—" Gabriella didn't hesitate. She drew the revolver, pointing it at the guard's back. "Drop the rifle, now." The man froze, then slowly lowered his weapon. "You're her, aren't you, Monroe's daughter?" The rifle, on the ground, he complied, turning to face her with hands raised. "Blackwell will have your hide for this." "Both of you." His gaze shifted past her shoulder. "Yeah, I see you there, Sheriff. Didn't think you'd stoop to thieving." Morgan appeared beside Gabriella, Thunder's lead rope in one hand. "It's not thieving when the property was stolen first." To Gabriella, he murmured, "Get to the horses." "I'll handle him." "He'll raise the alarm the moment we leave," she protested. "Not immediately, he won't." Morgan's expression was grimly determined. "Go, Gabriella, now." She backed away, keeping the revolver trained on the guard until shadows swallowed her. Once out of sight, she ran to where their horses waited, heart pounding in her ears. Minutes later, Morgan appeared with Thunder in tow. "We need to move fast," he said, mounting in one fluid motion. "He won't stay tied for long." They rode hard, following the creek back toward Monroe land. Only when they crossed onto her property did Gabriella allow herself to breathe normally. "That was too close," she gasped, reining in beside the original corral. "What did you do to him?" "Just tied him up and gagged him. He'll be free by morning." Morgan dismounted to secure Thunder in the repaired corral. "You did well back there. Quick thinking." "I was terrified," she admitted. Morgan approached her horse, looking up at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You didn't show it. That was brave, Gabriella." Foolish, maybe, but brave. Something in his tone made her chest tighten. She slid from the saddle, suddenly aware of their isolation in the moonlit night. "We did it. We got Thunder back. We did." His hand came up, hovering near her cheek without touching. "Blackwell will come looking for him." "And us." "Let him come," she said with more confidence than she felt. "We'll face him together." Morgan's eyes searched hers, something unspoken passing between them. For a heart-stopping moment, Gabriella thought he might touch her, might bridge the careful distance he always maintained. Instead, he stepped back, the moment breaking like a soap bubble. "We should get back to town before our absence is noticed." The ride to White Pine passed in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. At the boarding house, Morgan walked her to the door. "The broker arrives at noon," he said. "I'll bring Thunder in then. With luck, we'll have the money by evening. And if Blackwell comes looking before that, he won't find anything. I'll keep Thunder at the livery under guard." Morgan hesitated. "Gabriella, about tonight—" "Thank you," she interrupted, not ready for whatever he might say. "For everything." His expression softened. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's an important day." Sleep proved elusive, her mind replaying the night's events. Not just the danger and the rescue, but that moment afterward, the look in Morgan's eyes, the almost touch that had sent her heart racing. What was happening to her? After Denver, she'd sworn never to let a man close again. Yet here she was, walls crumbling like sand castles against the tide. Morning brought no clarity, only a renewed sense of purpose. Gabriella dressed with care, choosing her most businesslike attire for the meeting with the horse broker. By noon, she was at the livery where Morgan waited with a freshly groomed Thunder. "Magnificent animal," breathed Mr. Hargrove, the broker from Helena, circling the stallion with appreciative eyes. "Wild caught, you say?" "Yes, just recently," Morgan confirmed. "He's not broken to saddle yet, but his bloodlines are exceptional. Spanish barb from the look of him." Hargrove nodded. "I can see it. Strong chest, good legs." He glanced at Gabriella. "You're selling your interest as well, Miss Monroe." "Yes. My ranch needs immediate capital more than breeding stock." The negotiation that followed was tense but ultimately successful. Hargrove offered $800 for Thunder, less than they'd hoped, but exactly the amount needed to satisfy Blackwell's claim. "Done," Gabriella said before Morgan could counter. "Cash on delivery." "I'll arrange transport tomorrow," Hargrove replied. "The funds will be available at the bank this afternoon." As they left the livery, Gabriella could barely contain her elation. "We did it. $800, exactly what we need." Morgan's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yes, we did. Congratulations." "What's wrong?" "I thought you'd be pleased." "I am. It's just—" He glanced around the busy street. "Let's discuss this somewhere private." They ended up at the sheriff's office, where Deputy Watkins was sorting through wanted posters. At a nod from Morgan, he discreetly left them alone. "Blackwell was at the bank this morning," Morgan said once the door closed. "Jenkins told me he was asking about your account, whether you'd made any large deposits." Gabriella's triumph faltered. "He knows about Thunder. He suspects, at least. And when Hargrove deposits that money this afternoon, he'll be certain." Morgan paced the small office. You should know his man filed a complaint this morning. Claims rustlers stole a valuable stallion from Blackwell property last night. But that's ridiculous. Thunder was ours to begin with. I know that. You know that. But without witnesses to the original theft, it becomes complicated. Morgan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I've delayed filing the report, but Blackwell's already threatening to contact the territorial governor. Gabriella sank into a chair. So even with the money, we're not safe. Not entirely, no. Morgan knelt before her, his eyes earnest. But paying the debt removes his primary leverage. After that, the rustling accusation becomes his word against ours. And your word as sheriff carries weight, she realized. Some. Though my involvement complicates things. A wry smile touched his lips. Sheriffs aren't supposed to participate in night raids, justified or not. I'm sorry. I've put your position at risk. Don't be. I knew what I was doing. He hesitated, then covered her hand with his. The contact sent warmth spreading up her arm. Gabriella, whatever happens with Blackwell, I want you to know the office door burst open, startling them apart. Deputy Watkins stood there, face flushed. Sheriff, there's trouble at the bank. Blackwell's men are blocking the entrance. Won't let Hargrove in to make the deposit. Morgan was on his feet instantly. Get your shotgun and meet me there. Outside, a crowd had gathered around the bank. 3 of Blackwell's men, including Holt, stood menacingly at the entrance. Hargrove waited anxiously nearby, clutching his money pouch. What's going on here, Holt? Morgan demanded, pushing through the onlookers. Just having a friendly conversation with Mr. Hargrove, Holt drawled. About stolen property. Step aside. You're blocking a public business. Make me sheriff. Holt's hand hovered near his pistol. Or better yet, arrest the horse thief standing right there. He nodded toward Gabriella. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Morgan's expression hardened. Only thief I see is the man who cut my fence and stole horses from Monroe property yesterday. Prove it, Holt challenged. I don't have to prove anything to you. Now step aside, or I'll arrest you for disturbing the peace. The standoff stretched taut as a wire. Watkins appeared at Morgan's side, shotgun at the ready. Townspeople watched with bated breath, many clearly sympathetic to Gabriella's cause but unwilling to openly defy Blackwell's men. There's a problem here, gentlemen, came a cultured voice. Harold Blackwell himself appeared, immaculately dressed as always. Sheriff, why is your deputy pointing a shotgun at my employees? Your men are obstructing a lawful business transaction, Morgan replied evenly. Am I to understand this transaction involves payment for stolen property? Blackwell's cold gaze fixed on Gabriella. My stallion, specifically. The horse wasn't yours to begin with, she retorted. Your men stole him from my land yesterday. A serious accusation, Miss Monroe. Do you have witnesses? Do you? Morgan countered. To support your claim that the horse was on your property legally. The crowd had grown larger, townspeople drawn by the confrontation. Blackwell glanced around, clearly weighing his options. Public opinion, Gabriella realized, mattered even to a man of his power. Perhaps, Blackwell said finally, this is a misunderstanding that could be resolved privately. Miss Monroe, a word, Morgan stepped forward. Anything you have to say to Miss Monroe can be said in front of witnesses. Very well. Blackwell's smile was cold. I'm willing to forgive the theft of my stallion and the debt your father owed in exchange for the deed to your property. A clean slate. You walk away free and clear. The offer hung in the air. Gabriella felt the weight of eyes upon her. Morgan's, the townspeople's, Blackwell's calculating gaze. In that moment, the truth crystallized within her. This wasn't just about debt or water rights or even a magnificent stallion. This was about power, Blackwell's need to demonstrate it, her refusal to submit to it. "No," she said clearly. "I have the funds to pay my father's debt. I'm keeping my ranch, even at the risk of arrest, prison." Blackwell's voice hardened. "Think carefully, Miss Monroe. A woman alone has few protections on the frontier." "She's not alone," came a voice from the crowd. Naya stepped forward, her dark eyes flashing. "I saw Blackwell's men cut the fence yesterday, saw them drive the horses onto his land." Surprise rippled through the onlookers. Holt's hand moved toward his gun. "The old Indian's lying." "Am I?" Naya challenged. "I can show where they cut the fence, show the tracks of 3 horses driving the Mustangs, one rider with a spur that cuts deeper on the right." Holt's face paled slightly. His right spur was noticeably longer than his left, a fact Gabriella herself had noticed during their first encounter. "I saw them too," piped up another voice. Timothy pushed through the crowd. "Was coming to check on the horses when I spotted them driving Thunder through the north pasture." Other voices joined in: Mr. Collins, Mrs. Weaver, even Old Man Johnson, each adding details that corroborated Gabriella's version of events. The tide of public opinion was turning visibly. Faces that had been neutral now openly hostile toward Blackwell. Blackwell's expression remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "It seems you've made quite an impression on White Pine, Miss Monroe, but this isn't over." "Yes, it is," Morgan said firmly. "Miss Monroe will pay her father's debt in full this afternoon. The matter of the horses can be settled before the circuit judge when he arrives, along with charges against your men for fence cutting and trespassing." For a moment, Blackwell looked as though he might argue further. Then, with deliberate casualness, he straightened his jacket. "Very well, I know when I'm outnumbered." His cold eyes found Gabriella's. "Congratulations, Miss Monroe, you've won this skirmish, but frontiers change. Railroads come. Times change. Remember that." With that, he strode away, his men following reluctantly. The crowd parted to let them pass, then erupted in chatter as Hargrove was finally permitted to enter the bank. Morgan turned to Gabriella, relief evident in his features. "It's over." "Is it?" she asked, still processing what had happened. "Blackwell doesn't fight battles he can't win, especially not in public. Once the debt is paid and the community's support for you is clear, he'll back off." A smile touched his lips. "You have allies now, Gabriella, a community." She glanced around at the townspeople, many of whom nodded encouragingly or offered smiles. Naya stood apart from the others, watching with knowing eyes. Timothy beamed with youthful pride in his part of the victory. "Thank you," Gabriella said to them all. "I won't forget this." Inside the bank, Jenkins processed Hargrove's deposit and prepared a receipt for Blackwell's debt. When the transaction was complete, he handed Gabriella a paper declaring the debt satisfied in full. "Congratulations, Miss Monroe," Jenkins said with genuine warmth. "Your father would be proud." Outside, Morgan waited to escort her home. The ride to the Double M passed in companionable silence, both too emotionally drained for conversation. Only when they reached the ranch did Morgan speak. "I'll check on the remaining Mustangs, make sure everything's secure." While he tended to the horses, Gabriella wandered through the small house that was now truly hers. In just a few weeks, it had begun to feel like home, not just shelter, but a place where she belonged. The realization brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Morgan found her on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant hills in shades of gold and crimson. He paused at the steps, hat in hand. "Beautiful evening." "It is," she agreed, wiping away a stray tear. "Thank you, Morgan, for everything." He climbed the steps slowly, stopping a respectful distance away. "No need for thanks. We were partners in this," where she asked, noting his use of past tense. Something flickered across his face, uncertainty, perhaps. With Blackwell handled and the debt paid, I suppose our arrangement has concluded. The thought sent an unexpected pang through Gabriella's chest. I see. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Morgan cleared his throat. Gabriella, there's something I should tell you, something you deserve to know about me. What is it? His blue eyes met hers directly. I knew your father well better than I've let on. We weren't just acquaintances or even just friends. We were partners once in more ways than one. What do you mean? Morgan sighed, looking out toward the hills. After the war, we drifted west together, two broken men looking for a fresh start. We worked claims, drove cattle, eventually pooled our money to buy this land. A rueful smile touched his lips. The double M. Monroe and Morgan. Gabriella stared at him in shock. You own this ranch. With my father, half of it, yes, until we had a falling out over a woman, your stepmother. He met her gaze again. I loved her once. Your father knew it, but she chose him. I couldn't stay after that, so I sold my share to James and moved on. Why didn't you tell me this before? At first, I wasn't sure how much you knew. Then, as I got to know you, he trailed off. I was afraid it would change things between us. Change what exactly? Gabriella asked, her pulse quickening. Morgan took a step closer, still maintaining a careful distance. The way you look at me, the way you've begun to trust me. His voice lowered. The possibility of something more. The admission hung in the air between them. Gabriella felt herself at a crossroads, safety behind her carefully constructed walls, or risk in the unknown territory of trust. That night in Denver, she found herself saying, the words emerging of their own volition. When my father was killed, it wasn't just a gambling dispute. Morgan remained silent, waiting. My step-uncle, Gabriella continued, each word a struggle, had been inappropriate since my arrival. I managed to avoid being alone with him until that night. He'd been drinking. He cornered me in the library. Her voice faltered. When I fought back, he became violent. My father walked in during the struggle. They fought. My step-uncle had a gun. Understanding dawned in Morgan's eyes. That's why you flinch from touch, why you came west alone. After my father died, there was nowhere else to go. No one believed my account of what happened. My step-uncle was respected in Denver society. Gabriella wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm evening. I learned that men's hands could hurt, even when they claimed to protect. Morgan's expression was pained. Gabriella, I would never, I know, she interrupted softly. That's what terrifies me. He took a tentative step closer. May I? He asked, hand outstretched but not touching. Heart pounding, Gabriella nodded. Morgan's fingers brushed hers, gentle as a whisper. She tensed involuntarily but didn't pull away. His touch was warm, calloused from work but infinitely careful. I'm afraid, she admitted, voice barely audible. Not of you but of this, of trusting again. I know, Morgan replied, his blue eyes tender. We can take all the time you need. I'm afraid to be touched, she whispered, giving voice to her deepest fear. Morgan's hand tightened slightly around hers. Then I'll teach you gentle again, he promised softly. One day at a time, one touch at a time, if you'll let me. In that moment, with the setting sun painting the world in gold and his hand warm around hers, Gabriella felt something crack open inside her chest, a door long sealed against hope, against possibility. I'd like that, she whispered. The weeks that followed brought change to the Double M. With the debt to Blackwell paid and the community firmly behind her, Gabriella threw herself into restoring the ranch to productivity. The remaining Mustangs were gentled and trained, with Morgan's patient guidance. Timothy became a regular presence, eager to learn and quick with a hammer. Even Naya visited often, teaching Gabriella the skills of frontier survival. As summer gave way to autumn, the ranch transformed. Fences were mended, the barn reinforced, the house made truly habitable. Morgan came daily, sometimes in his official capacity as sheriff, more often as teacher, partner, and increasingly, friend. True to his word, he never pushed beyond Gabriella's comfort. Each touch was offered, never imposed a hand to help her mount, fingers brushing as they worked side by side, a steadying arm when she stumbled. Gradually, the instinctive tension began to fade from her shoulders when he drew near. October arrived with its crisp mornings and golden afternoons. Gabriella stood in the yard, surveying her domain with satisfaction. 6 trained horses grazed in the north pasture, ready for sale. The garden Nea had helped her plant had yielded a bountiful harvest. The house gleamed with fresh paint, smoke curling cheerfully from the chimney. The sound of an approaching wagon drew her attention. Morgan appeared around the bend in the trail, a load of firewood stacked behind him. He smiled when he saw her waiting, that special smile that seemed reserved just for her. "Good morning," he called, reining in the team. "Thought you might need wood before the cold sets in." "Always thinking ahead," she teased, approaching the wagon. Morgan jumped down, his movements easy and familiar. "One of us has to. You'd still be patching that roof if I hadn't reminded you winter's coming." Their banter had become comfortable, a dance they both enjoyed. Gabriella helped unload the wood, working alongside him with practiced efficiency. When the task was complete, Morgan wiped his brow, studying her face. "You look happy," he observed. "I am," she realized. For the first time in a very long time, his expression softened. "Good, that's good." He hesitated, then added, "I have news from town. The railroads confirmed they'll be laying track 10 miles south of here by spring. Does that concern you? It means change. Opportunities, but challenges too." He leaned against the woodpile. "Land prices will rise. More settlers will come. Blackwell's already positioning himself to benefit. And us. The double M." Morgan's eyes met hers. "That depends on what you want, Gabriella." The question hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. She knew he wasn't just asking about ranch business. "I want to stay," she said quietly, "to build something here, something lasting." Alone, the word carried weight, a question within a question. Gabriella took a deep breath. "No. Not alone." Morgan stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "May I?" he asked, as he always did. Instead of answering, Gabriella closed the distance herself, her hand reaching for his. Their fingers intertwined, his thumb brushing gently across her knuckles. The touch sent warmth spiraling through her, no longer accompanied by fear. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice steadier than her heartbeat, "about us, about the future." "Have you now?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Any conclusions?" "A few." She met his gaze directly. "I think perhaps the double M should live up to its name again. Monroe and Morgan." Morgan's expression grew serious, his blue eyes searching hers. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "That depends on what you're hearing," she replied, surprising herself with the playfulness in her tone. "I'm hearing a proposal of sorts." His free hand came up, hovering near her cheek. "May I?" he asked again. At her nod, his fingers brushed her face feather-light. Gabriella leaned into the touch, her eyes closing briefly. When she opened them, Morgan's gaze was tender. "I love you, Gabriella Monroe," he said simply. "Have since that day at the social when you stood up to Blackwell without flinching, maybe even before that." The words unlocked something in her chest, a last barrier falling away. "I love you too," she whispered, "even when it terrified me." Morgan's smile was like sunrise. "Does it still terrify you less each day?" She took a shaky breath. "Morgan, would you kiss me?" His expression grew solemn. "Are you certain?" "No," she admitted, "but I want to try with you." With infinite care, Morgan cupped her face in his hands. He moved slowly, giving her every opportunity to retreat. When his lips finally met hers, the touch was gentle as a whisper, brief, warm, asking nothing. Gabriella's heart raced, but not with fear. When he began to pull away, she surprised them both by following, her hand coming up to rest against his chest as she returned the kiss with newfound courage. When they finally separated, Morgan's eyes were bright with emotion. "Well," he said, a little breathlessly, "I'd say that's a fine start." Gabriella laughed, the sound bubbling up from a place of joy she'd thought long buried. "A start, yes." "There's no rush," Morgan assured her. "We have time, all the time you need." "And if I said I don't want to wait too long?" she asked, bold in this new territory of possibility. "For us to be partners in every sense," his smile deepened. "Then I'd say we should speak to Reverend Phillips, see if the church is available next month." "Next month," she echoed, surprised by the immediacy. "Unless you'd prefer sooner," Morgan teased. Then more seriously, "or later." "Whatever pace feels right to you, Gabriella." She considered, listening to her heart rather than her fears. "Next month sounds perfect. Time enough to prepare, but not so long that I lose my nerve." Morgan laughed, the sound rich and warm in the autumn air. "I believe that's the first time anyone's accused Gabriella Monroe of lacking nerve." Winter in Montana arrived with a fury that tested even the hardiest souls. Snow piled in drifts against the double Emticus barn, and the creek froze solid enough to walk across. But inside the ranch house, warmth prevailed. Gabriella stood before the small mirror in what had once been her father's bedroom, adjusting the simple white dress Mrs. Weaver had sewn for the occasion. Outside, the world lay hushed under a blanket of snow, but the paths to the house had been cleared for today's guests. A knock at the door preceded Nea's entrance, her dark eyes approving as they took in Gabriella's appearance. "You look like spring in the midst of winter," she said, offering a small bouquet of dried flowers and evergreen sprigs. "For the bride." "Thank you," Gabriella replied, accepting the makeshift bouquet. "For everything, Nea. I wouldn't be here without your help." "You would have found your way," the older woman said with confidence, "but I am glad to have been part of the journey." She adjusted a strand of Gabriella's hair. "It is time. They are waiting." Downstairs, the small parlor had been transformed. Evergreen boughs decorated the mantel, and lanterns cast a golden glow over the gathered guests. Mrs. Finch, the Collins family, Timothy and his parents, Dr. Harrison and his wife, even Old Man Johnson, all had braved the winter weather to witness this union. At the far end of the room stood Reverend Phillips, his Bible open in preparation. And beside him, Morgan, clean-shaven for the occasion, dressed in a new suit, his blue eyes finding hers the moment she appeared at the top of the stairs. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. Gabriella was aware only of Morgan's steady presence beside her, his hand warm around hers as they spoke their vows. When Reverend Phillips pronounced them husband and wife, the gathered friends erupted in applause and cheers. "May I?" Morgan whispered, his eyes seeking permission for their first kiss as a married couple. Gabriella's answer was to rise on tiptoe, meeting him halfway. The kiss was gentle yet sure, a promise, a beginning. The celebration that followed filled the house with laughter and conversation. Mrs. Collins' punch flowed freely, and the dining table groaned under dishes contributed by every guest. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Morgan found Gabriella by the window, watching snow begin to fall again outside. "Mrs. O'Brien," he said softly, coming to stand beside her. "How does it feel?" "Unfamiliar," she admitted with a smile. "But right." His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with practiced ease. Our guests will be leaving soon before the snow gets worse. And you, she asked, a flutter of anticipation in her stomach. Will you be leaving too, Sheriff? Morgan's eyes darkened slightly. Not unless you wish it. This is your home, Gabriella. We move at your pace, remember. She turned to face him fully, her fear now a distant memory compared to the love that had grown between them. Stay, she said simply. This is our home now. The double M. Monroe and Morgan, just as it should be. Later, after the last guest had departed and the house settled into silence, Gabriella stood in the bedroom doorway, watching Morgan bank the fire for the night. He moved with the easy confidence she'd come to cherish, his profile strong in the firelight. Morgan, she called softly. He turned, his expression softening at the sight of her. Yes, I'm not afraid anymore, she said, holding out her hand to him. Understanding dawned in his eyes as he crossed the room to her. Are you certain? We have all the time in the world. In answer, she took his hand and led him into the bedroom, their bedroom now. When he kissed her, there was no hesitation in her response, only trust and growing desire. I love you, Morgan O'Brien, she whispered against his lips. And I love you, Gabriella O'Brien, he replied, his touch gentle as promised, teaching her once again the language of tenderness she'd thought forever lost. Spring came to White Pine with a rush of melting snow and new possibilities. The double M flourished under their combined care, Morgan's practical knowledge of ranching complementing Gabriella's determined vision for the future. As Morgan had predicted, the railroad's approach brought change to the region. Land prices rose, and new settlers arrived weekly. Blackwell continued his expansionist efforts, but gave the double M a wide berth, perhaps recognizing that some battles weren't worth fighting. On a warm May morning, Gabriella stood on the porch, watching Morgan and Timothy working with a new group of Mustangs in the corral. Her hand rested on her still flat stomach, where the first stirrings of new life had made themselves known just days earlier. Morgan looked up, catching sight of her watching. He smiled, that special smile that still made her heart skip, and waved. Gabriella waved back, anticipation building as she considered how she would share her news that evening. Their child would grow up here, she thought, surrounded by the beauty of this land and the strength of the community they'd built. The future stretched before them, as wide and promising as the Montana sky above. As if reading her thoughts, Morgan left the corral and strode toward the house. Everything all right, he called. Everything's perfect, Gabriella replied, moving down the steps to meet him. His arms opened to her, and she stepped into his embrace without hesitation. The fear that had once defined her was now just a distant memory, replaced by the certainty of love and the promise of tomorrow. Perfect, Morgan agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead, and getting better every day. Together, they turned to face their land, their home, their future, the double M standing strong against the backdrop of the Wild West they both had learned to love.